For 3,000 years, the galaxy had been quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from emptiness, but the quiet of balance, of order. The Council of Elders had made sure of that. Their laws, called the Accords of Peace, had stopped wars before they could start. Entire generations had been born, lived, and died without ever hearing the sound of a battle cannon or feeling the tremble of a fleet in orbit. People from thousands of worlds had grown used to safety. The young ones didn't even believe war was possible anymore. The old ones, those who had ancestors who fought in the last war, spoke of it like it was a story from ancient myths. And so, everyone believed peace would last forever. That was the lie the galaxy had been living. Then, one ordinary cycle. The lie broke. It began with a flicker in the communication channels, just a glitch at first, or so everyone thought. News hubs on hundreds of planets reported minor technical issues. Traders on space routes saw their nav screens go dark for seconds at a time. Even the Council itself experienced strange interruptions. But when the screens came back, the message was there. It was not from the Council. It was not from any trusted government. It was from a voice no one recognized, speaking in every known language at once. This is the Dawn Coalition. The peace accords are dead. From this moment, all who stand in our way will be crushed. Your worlds will kneel, or they will burn. The message repeated 3 times, echoing through every communication device, civilian, military, even personal. Ones in people's homes, and then it vanished. Across the galaxy, panic spread like wildfire. Civilian ships fled from border systems. Families locked their doors as if that could stop an orbital bombardment. Governments rushed to call emergency meetings. The Council of Elders sat in silence for almost an hour before even speaking. For 3,000 years they had been the enforcers of peace, but now they had no army to fight with. But on Earth, things were different. The leaders of humanity gathered in a hidden chamber deep below the United Earth's Fleet Command. The room was dim, the air heavy. The broadcast had played here too. But unlike the frightened chatter echoing across other worlds, this room was silent. One general, a tall woman with sharp eyes, finally broke the silence. "They've done it," she said. "They've given us the excuse." Another officer leaned forward. "We've waited for this day. Are we ready?" The general's lips curled into something strange, half a smile, half a challenge. "We've been ready for 3,000 years. Because here was the truth the rest of the galaxy had never known. Humanity had never truly laid down its arms. They had signed the peace treaties, yes. They had reduced their fleets in public view, yes. They had dismantled bases where everyone could see, yes. But far from the eyes of the Council, hidden in asteroid belts and deep space shadows, humanity had been building. They had trained in silence. They had studied war while pretending to forget it. They had built ships faster than anything the galaxy had seen, armed with weapons designed to cut through shields like paper. They had waited patiently while the rest of the galaxy grew soft, and now the wait was over. The Dawn Coalition thought they were striking at a weakened prey. They thought they would find humans afraid, scrambling to defend their borders. Instead, they would find something they could never have imagined: a species that smiled at the word war like an old friend returning home. On the streets of Earth's cities, the reaction was quieter than in other worlds, but it was not fear. In the bars, in the training halls, in the factories, there was a hum of activity. Old veterans whispered to the younger ones, "It's our turn now." Shipbuilders worked through the night, pulling blueprints from locked vaults. Pilots who had been flying civilian transports put on their old uniforms again in space. Deep beyond the farthest colony, entire fleets powered up for the first time in centuries. The black holes of human warships drank in the starlight. their engines glowing like the eyes of predators finally opening. The rest of the galaxy did not see this. Not yet. All they saw was the public face of humanity, calm, silent, and, to their eyes, foolishly unprepared. They didn't see the smirks exchanged in human command rooms, the quiet confidence in their voices, the certainty that they had been waiting for this moment longer than any alien could imagine. The shatter of silence had come, but for humanity, it was not the sound of fear. It was the sound of a starting gun. And they had been ready at the line for a very long time. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, a human captain looked out at his fleet. The comms officer asked if they should send a response to the alien threat. The captain shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "Let them come, then we'll answer." His voice was calm. His smile was the same smile every human commander now wore. The war had just been declared. But for humanity, it had already been one in their minds. All that was left was to show the galaxy why you never wake the sleeping wolves. The Dawn Coalition moved fast. They had spent years secretly preparing for this moment, building their fleets in hidden shipyards and recruiting soldiers from every member species. Now that they had broken the peace, they wasted no time showing their strength. Within the first week, they struck at human outer colonies, small, scattered worlds far from Earth but rich with resources. Their warships arrived without warning, peering out of the dark like wolves among sheep. On the colony of New Carthage, the skies were filled with the thunder of alien engines. Huge ships blotted out the sun, and troops poured down from orbit. Most civilians had never even seen an alien soldier before, and now they were surrounded. By them, the alien commanders expected the humans to scream, to panic, to beg for mercy. That was what always happened when they took a planet. But something strange happened instead. The first human they dragged from a factory was a young worker named Elias Kane. His hands were still covered in engine grease. The alien officer, towering over him, shoved a weapon in his face and shouted, "Your world is ours now. Obey, and you might live." Elias looked at him for a long moment, then gave a small smirk. "You think so?" he said quietly. The officer froze. There was no fear in the human's eyes, only something unsettling, something almost like amusement. All over the captured colonies, the same thing happened. Humans surrendered when ordered, yes, but their faces didn't match their actions. They walked into alien custody with calm steps, exchanged quick glances with each other, and wore that same faint, mocking smile. The coalition soldiers began to whisper among themselves. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In their minds, humanity was soft after 3,000 years of peace. The humans were supposed to be weak. Yet the more they looked into their captives' eyes, the more they felt the opposite. It was as if the humans were the ones waiting for something to happen. On the planet Harrow's edge, an alien officer tried to scare the local population into total obedience. He ordered a public execution of a human farmer accused of defiance. The farmer, an old man named Garrett Hale, stood calmly as the officer raised his weapon. Instead of pleading, Garrett leaned forward and whispered, "Better aim well. My people don't take kindly to sloppy work." The officer hesitated. For a second, the gathered crowd of humans seemed to lean in not in fear, but in interest, as though they were watching the opening move of a game they had played before, back on Earth. Reports of the alien landings reached the United Earth Fleet Command. In the underground war room, the generals and admirals studied the transmissions from the captured worlds. "They're making the same mistake over and over," one admiral said, tapping a finger on the map. "They think they've taken these colonies. They haven't." The general beside her gave a slow nod. "Our people know the plan. We've trained for this." The aliens didn't know it. But every human civilian, no matter where they lived, had been quietly prepared for this kind of invasion. Not with guns, not with armor, but with information, with coded phrases, with secret channels of communication buried so deep in their society that no outsider could find them. The smiles the aliens saw weren't random, they were signals. Smirk meant the message had been received. A calm stare meant the plan was already in motion. In the dusty alleys of New Carthage, a mechanic slipped away from his guards and disappeared into a maintenance tunnel. On Harrow's Edge, a group of young workers accidentally spilled crates over an alien supply route, delaying their shipments. On the colony of Vega's Rest, a schoolteacher used the excuse of evacuating children to hide a small transmitter that began pulsing encrypted bursts into deep space. Every move seemed small on its own. Together, they were the opening beats of something much bigger. The Dawn Coalition commanders saw the humans' behavior as strange but harmless. After all, the colonies were under their control. The humans had no warships here, no armies, no way to resist. The aliens celebrated their easy victories, certain that Earth itself would be just as simple to take. What they didn't know was that these easy victories were traps. The humans were letting them in, letting them think they had won. And all the while, hidden fleets and Black Ops units were moving quietly into position. One night on New Carthage, as alien troops patrolled the streets, Elias Kane sat in his small, dim cell. He had been working at the factory only days before. Now he was a prisoner. Through the bars, another human in the next cell over caught his eye. They exchanged a nod. No fear. The other man asked softly. Elias shook his head and smiled. Why fear what's already lost to them? The man didn't need to ask what he meant. They both knew. The aliens might be holding the planet for now, but it wasn't theirs. Not truly. Not for long, far above the colony, beyond the range of alien scanners. A small black ship drifted in the shadows of an asteroid. Its captain, a human woman with steel in her eyes, watched the planet below. Hold steady, she told her crew. They don't even know we're here yet. And she smiled the same smile that every human in the captured territories seemed to share. The coalition thought they had struck first. But in truth, they had just stepped into a game humanity had been preparing for longer than any alien lifetime. And soon, the rest of the galaxy would understand why humans were the only ones not afraid when war came. The galaxy believed humanity was quiet because they had grown weak. The Dawn Coalition believed it too. They thought humans had forgotten the taste of war, that their armies were only a shadow of the past. But what the aliens didn't know was that for 3,000 years, humanity had been playing a different game, one of patience, secrecy, and preparation. Long before the peace accords had been signed, human leaders had made a choice. They would agree to peace publicly, but they would never truly let their guard down. The history of Earth was filled with empires that rose and fell because they grew lazy in times of calm. Humanity refused to make that mistake. So, while other civilizations dismantled their weapons, humanity moved theirs into deep space, hiding them among the asteroid fields, buried under ice moons, and sealed inside caverns no alien could reach. While alien academies taught diplomacy and peacekeeping, human academies taught both and still kept the war rooms running, training new generations in strategy, tactics, and survival. The world saw smiling diplomats and harmless trade ships. The truth was far from harmless. In the black void beyond the edges of mapped space, hidden stations thrummed with life. Massive shipyards worked in secret, crafting warships with black hulls that reflected no light. Each ship was fitted with weapons the galaxy had never seen: missiles that bent around shields, cannons that could punch through solid rock, and stealth drives that made them ghosts in the dark. For 3,000 years, these fleets had been waiting. The crews trained endlessly, knowing they might never be called into action, but also knowing that if the day came, they had to be ready within hours. Every system was tested again and again. Every soldier knew their post as if it were burned into their bones. Now that day had arrived in a hidden base orbiting a dead star. Admiral Rain stood before a glowing holographic map. Points of red marked the captured colonies. Yellow lines traced the movements of alien fleets. Blue signals human covert teams were already inside the occupied worlds, feeding back intelligence. Her voice was calm but sharp. Operation Black. Sky is active. All fleets will move into pre-assigned positions. Silent mode until my mark. Across the darkness, ships powered up without broadcasting a single signal. Engines glowed faintly, just enough to drift through space. The aliens. Scanners picked up nothing. To them, the void was still empty. On one of the captured colonies, New Carthage, a group of alien officers stood over a tactical display, discussing their next move toward Earth. Suddenly, their long-range comms blinked out. They thought it was a malfunction till the power to their command center flickered and died. Outside, the night sky above the city lit up with streaks of silver fire. The first human counterattack had begun. It happened so fast that the aliens didn't even have time to raise their planetary shields. From orbit, black human warships appeared out of nothingness, their stealth drives dropping in an instant as they unleashed precise strikes. Weapon batteries on alien cruisers exploded before they could fire a shot. Supply depots vanished in clouds of smoke and light. But the most shocking part was how surgical it was. Humans didn't target civilians. Every shot was calculated. Only command posts, weapons, caches, and military ships were hit. In minutes, the aliens' entire ability to fight on that world was gone. Elias Kane, the young factory worker who had smirked at his captor days before, was among the prisoners freed that night. Human Marines in matte black armor moved through the streets like shadows, cutting through alien patrols with terrifying precision. When Elias asked one of them how they had gotten here so fast, the soldier only said, "We were never far." On Harrow's Edge, the story was the same. Human infiltration teams struck in the dead of night, disabling planetary comms and sabotaging landing pads so alien reinforcements couldn't arrive. In some places, the humans didn't even fire a shot. They simply caused so much confusion that the aliens turned on each other by the time dawn rose over the captured worlds. The aliens realized something terrible. They hadn't been fighting a slow, unprepared opponent. They had walked into the hands of a species that had been waiting for this war since before their enemies were even born. The coalition leaders were furious. Their intelligence reports had been wrong from the beginning. Their advisors swore humanity had no fleets, no hidden armies. Yet now reports came flooding in of black warships striking not just on the front lines, but deep inside coalition space. Fuel stations exploded. Supply convoys vanished. Communication relays were destroyed. One alien commander threw his datapad across the room in rage. "They're not fighting fair," he shouted. His second-in-command looked at him with something close to fear. "No, they're fighting to win." Far from the chaos in the silent depths of space, Admiral Rain received the first wave of victory reports. Her expression didn't change. She simply turned to her officers and said, "Phase 1 is complete. Begin Phase 2. Her voice was steady, but deep down, every person in that room felt the same quiet satisfaction that had been building in humanity for centuries. This wasn't just war, it was the moment they had been preparing for longer than the coalition could even imagine. And somewhere, in the hidden war councils across Earth and her colonies, commanders allowed themselves the smallest of smiles. The galaxy still didn't understand why humans smirked when war was declared. But soon, very soon, everyone would know. The Dawn Coalition had believed their fleets could crush humanity before Earth even had time to react. But after the first wave of human counterattacks, their confidence began to crack. Supply lines were cut, fleets were destroyed without warning. And entire colonies they thought were under control slipped from their grasp overnight. Still, the alien leaders told themselves it was only a setback. They had numbers, resources, and the advantage of holding the front lines. In their minds, humanity would be pushed back soon enough. They were wrong. Admiral Rain knew the momentum had shifted. The hidden fleets were no longer shadows, they were now wolves on the hunt. And it was time to do something no one in the galaxy would dare to even imagine: strike at the enemy's heart, in the command chamber deep beneath Earth's fleet headquarters. She stood before a massive holomap showing the Coalition's core worlds. Her voice was calm, but every officer in the room could feel the weight of her words. Phase 2 begins now. We are taking the fight to them. The target was the homeworld of the Zathri, one of the main races leading the Coalition. It was a heavily fortified planet surrounded by defense stations, minefields, and patrol fleets. For 3,000 years, it had been untouchable. No enemy had ever gotten close. Until tonight. The operation began in silence. Dozens of human warships, their hulls coated in light-absorbing material, moved like shadows across the void. They didn't travel along known routes. Instead, they took paths through uncharted asteroid fields and dead systems where no one would think to look. The fleet split into smaller strike groups, each with a precise job to disable the defenses, cut communications, and keep enemy reinforcements far away, in the cold darkness near the Zathri homeworld. The lead ship Vigilant floated quietly, its engines cold. Inside, the crew moved with controlled precision, checking systems, loading weapons, and sealing combat suits. They all knew what they were about to do would be remembered for centuries. At the signal, every human ship powered up at once. It was like stars suddenly flaring into existence where none had been before. The alien defense stations barely had time to register the incoming signatures before the first human torpedoes struck. Shields collapsed, explosions lit the black sky, and debris rained down toward the planet. The Zathri fleet scrambled to respond. But human stealth ships had already slipped behind their formation. Enemy battleships found their engines disabled before they could turn to face the threat. Others simply vanished into sudden bursts of white light as railgun slugs tore through their cores. On the surface of the Zathri capital city, alarms wailed. This was something no one alive had ever experienced: an attack on their home. Government officials rushed into fortified bunkers, soldiers scrambled into the streets, and civilians looked up to see burning wreckage falling through the atmosphere. The Vigilance ground teams deployed next. Drop pods screamed through the air, slamming into key military sites with terrifying accuracy. Human Marines poured out, moving fast and without hesitation. They didn't waste time with small skirmishes. They went straight for the Central Command hub, the nerve center of the Zathri war machine. Inside the hub, the alien high command was in chaos. Officers shouted over each other, trying to understand how humans had breached every layer of their defenses so easily. One of them slammed his clawed hand on the table. They can't be this strong. They've been at peace for 3,000 years. A calm human voice answered from the shadows of the chamber doorway. We've been ready for 3,000 years. The alien commanders turned, and there stood a squad of human Marines in black combat armor, their weapons aimed and steady. The leader of the squad stepped forward. Your war ends here. Surrender your command codes. The Zathri refused, but it didn't matter. Within minutes, the humans had overridden their systems and broadcast a galaxy-wide message not of fear, but of warning. If you bring war to us, we will bring it to your own homes. Above the planet, the human fleet completed its work. The once impenetrable defenses were now nothing but wreckage. With their mission complete, the ships vanished into the void as quickly as they had come, leaving the Zathri leaders in shock and the coalition scrambling to regroup. Back aboard the Vigilant, Admiral Rain listened to the reports. Minimal human casualties. All objectives achieved. The message was clear. Humanity could reach anyone, anywhere, and no fortress was safe. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate. Coalition allies who had been confident in victory now began to doubt. Neutral civilizations watched in silence, some quietly offering intelligence or supplies to the humans. Even among the coalition's soldiers, whispers began to spread that maybe they had picked a fight with the wrong enemy. In the war room on Earth, Rain stood at the center of it all, her face lit by the glow of the maps. They thought, "We would defend our borders and hide behind our worlds," she said quietly to her officers. "Instead, we walked right into their capital. Let them think about that tonight." And somewhere, in the quiet streets of the captured colonies still, under alien control, the humans who had been living under occupation heard the news. That smirk, the one the aliens could never understand, spread wider. They knew now, without a doubt, that the war was turning. The Dawn Coalition had tried to show their power by declaring war. But tonight, humanity had shown something far more. Dangerous its reach, its patience, and its willingness to strike first when the moment was right. The galaxy would not forget what happened on the Zathri homeworld, and this was only the beginning. The attack on the Zathri homeworld shook the Dawn Coalition to its core. No one had believed humans could strike so deep, so fast, and with such precision. For the first time in 3,000 years, the coalition leaders felt true fear inside their own fortified walls. But fear quickly turned into rage. They gathered in emergency councils, their voices sharp and loud, vowing to erase humanity from the stars. The plan they created was meant to be their decisive blow. They would assemble the largest fleet in their history, hundreds of warships from every member species, and launch a direct assault on Earth itself. Their thinking was simple: destroy the human homeworld, and the rest of their colonies would surrender without a fight. It had worked in the past, long before the peace accords. They were sure it would work again. Messages went out to every allied world, calling ships and soldiers to the staging grounds. Massive carriers, bristling with weapons, joined with sleek, fast destroyers and heavy dreadnoughts. Supply ships followed close behind, carrying enough fuel, ammunition, and troops to wage a long siege. The coalition fleet was a wall of metal and firepower. It's unmatched by any single power in the galaxy, or so they thought. What they didn't know was that their plan was already compromised. Hidden among the workers in one of the coalition's key shipyards was a human intelligence agent. He had been living under an alien identity for years, feeding small bits of false information to make sure the coalition underestimated humanity. Now, his real mission began. Using an old cargo transmitter disguised as a maintenance tool, he sent a short, encrypted signal. It contained just 4 words: "They are coming here." On Earth, the United Fleet Command received the message and reacted instantly. Admiral Rain had been expecting something like this. Humans knew the coalition's pride would push them to try to strike at the heart. She had already prepared a counterplan, one designed not just to defend Earth, but to turn the enemy's own strength against them. The operation was called Iron Veil, in orbit around Earth. Massive shipyards and defense platforms powered up, but they did so quietly. From a distance, it looked like the humans were preparing for a desperate stand. To the coalition spies, the movement seemed like panicked last-minute defenses. That was exactly the image Rain wanted them to see. Weeks later, the coalition fleet entered the Sol system. From the bridge of their flagship, the alien commanders looked out at the planet they had come to destroy. Earth hung in the blackness, blue and green, looking small and vulnerable against the stars. Commence attack formation, ordered the Zathari warlord leading the armada. The first waves of alien ships advanced, weapons locking on to human defense stations. But before they could fire, the darkness around them shifted. It wasn't just space, it was ships. Dozens, then hundreds of human warships appeared, their stealth systems dropping in unison. They had been there the whole time, hiding in the shadows of moons and asteroids, waiting for the enemy to walk right into the trap. The alien fleet tried to turn, but it was already too late. From every direction, human ships unleashed fire. Railguns tore through hulls. Missile swarms found gaps in shields and detonated deep inside enemy vessels. Laser batteries carved through command decks in seconds. The coalition fleet was massive, but in the tight formations they had entered, they couldn't maneuver. Then the second phase of Iron Veil began. Mining stations near the asteroid belt suddenly came to life, not as mining platforms, but as hidden weapons arrays. From them, gravity mines were launched into the chaos, pulling enemy ships off course and slamming them into each other. Others were caught in tractor beams, held helpless as human warships pounded them into scrap. Inside the coalition flagship, panic broke out. The warlords screamed for reinforcements, but their comms were jammed. Orders turned into confusion, confusion into mistakes. A squadron of alien destroyers tried to retreat, only to find their hyperspace drives disabled by targeted human EMP strikes in the middle of the battle. Human marines boarded several alien vessels. They moved with terrifying precision, disabling crew, seizing control, and turning the captured ships' weapons against their former allies. To the coalition soldiers, it was madness. Humans were supposed to be defending their world, not capturing enemy ships in the middle of an overwhelming attack. Hours later, the battle was over. Half of the coalition fleet was destroyed. Another quarter was disabled and drifting. The rest fled in chaos, scattering into deep space. Earth stood untouched, its cities still shining in the night. And in the war room of the United Fleet Command, Admiral Rain listened to the reports. With the same steady calm she always carried. "They came to burn our home," she said to her officers, "and now they're the ones running." Across the galaxy, news of the disaster spread. Coalition allies began questioning whether this war was worth fighting. Some worlds quietly withdrew their fleets from the front lines. Others sent secret messages to humanity, asking about terms for peace. In the occupied colonies, the alien guards grew nervous. They had heard what happened at Earth. They saw the way the humans in their custody looked at them, smiling, patient, as if counting down to the day of liberation. And somewhere deep in the coalition's core space, the remaining leaders met in secret. The war they had thought would end in a quick, glorious victory had turned into a nightmare. They had underestimated humanity's strength, their patience, and most of all, their ability to turn any attack into an opportunity. The humans had not only defended their home, they had made it clear that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could ever break them. The smirk that had puzzled the galaxy from the first day of war now made perfect sense. Humanity wasn't smiling out of arrogance. They were smiling because they had been waiting for this moment all along. The defeat at Earth shattered the Dawn Coalition's confidence. What was supposed to be their final, crushing victory had turned into a humiliating disaster. The great fleet they had spent years building was now scattered wreckage drifting in space. The survivors limped home, their ships scarred and their crews silent. But the humans didn't stop to celebrate. Admiral Rain knew that hesitation was dangerous. If the coalition was given time to rebuild, they would come back stronger. The only way to end this war was to take it deeper into the enemy's own territory till there was nowhere left for them to hide. From the command deck of the Vigilant, Rain gave the order. Begin Phase 3. No more waiting. We finish this. The target was not just another military outpost or colony. This time, the humans aimed for the coalition's beating heart-tit supply network. Without fuel, ammunition, and resources, the enemy fleets would be powerless. And the humans had already mapped every critical link in that chain thanks to years of hidden agents and stolen intelligence. The first strikes came without warning. Human stealth cruisers appeared over refueling stations in deep space, disabling them in minutes before vanishing into hyperspace. Freighters carrying food and medicine for the front lines were intercepted and either destroyed or seized. Every convoy route the coalition depended on became a killing ground for the first time. Alien soldiers on the front began to feel hunger and shortage. Ammunition had to be rationed. Starships sat idle for lack of fuel. The coalition's commanders became desperate, forcing them to move supplies through unsafe, unmapped space in hopes of avoiding human ambushes. But that played right into humanity's hands. One such convoy, escorted by 3 heavy cruisers, thought they had found a safe route through a quiet, empty sector. They were wrong. Hidden in the shadows of a dense asteroid field, a squadron of human destroyers waited. The moment the convoy passed, they struck swift, brutal, and unstoppable. Within minutes, the escorts were crippled, and the supply ships were taken. The human fleet didn't just destroy the cargo, they kept it. Fuel and ammunition were redirected to liberated colonies. Food and medicine were sent to human worlds, still under alien threat. Every victory on the supply lines made the humans stronger and the coalition weaker. In the coalition's war council chambers, tempers boiled. Leaders of the member races shouted over one another, accusing each other of weakness and incompetence. The Zathri blamed the Korath, accused the Drellin demanded more protection for their own worlds instead of defending others. The unity that had once made the coalition dangerous was breaking apart. Meanwhile, on the ground, in occupied territories, resistance cells grew bolder. Humans who had once been forced to hide now openly sabotaged alien operations. Weapons and supplies, smuggled in by covert human teams, began arming these fighters. Small battles erupted in city streets. Alien patrols were ambushed and vanished. Without a trace, the aliens tried to respond by tightening control curfews, mass arrests, even executions. But these only made the resistance stronger. Civilians who had once kept their heads down now fought with the same quiet determination that had carried humanity through every war in its history. On the coalition's outer rim, one alien commander, Admiral Vorik, decided to try a different approach. Instead of attacking human fleets head-on, he planned to strike at a liberated colony and retake it, hoping to show the galaxy that the coalition still had teeth. His chosen target was Vega's Rest, a small but strategically important world humans had freed months earlier. What Vorik didn't know was that Vega's Rest was no ordinary colony anymore. It had been turned into a fortress, its cities ringed with concealed defense batteries and its skies patrolled by fast-response fighter wings. Human intelligence had intercepted Vorik's plan long before his fleet even left port. When the coalition ships arrived, they found the planet dark and silent, its surface seemingly unprotected. Confident, Vorik ordered his fleet into low orbit. That's when the trap closed. From the far side of Vegas Moon, a human battle group surged forward, weapons blazing. Orbital guns hidden in the planet's mountains came online, lancing through the enemy formation. Vorik's ships were torn apart before they could retreat. The few that escaped limped away, carrying news of yet another devastating loss. Back on Earth, Admiral Rain received the battle report with her usual calm. But this time, even she allowed herself a small smile. The pattern was clear now. Every move the coalition made, every attempt to regain control, ended with them losing more ground. In the occupied colonies, the effect was electric. The humans there heard about Vega's rest and the destruction of Vorik's fleet. The smirks on their faces grew wider. Even alien civilians living under coalition rule began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, the humans couldn't be beaten. The war was no longer a test of who had the biggest fleet. It had become a test of endurance, of will, of who could outlast the other. And in that kind of war, humanity had no equal. The Dawn Coalition had declared war, thinking it would be swift and glorious. Now, they found themselves bleeding from 1,000 cuts, unable to defend their borders, unable to feed their armies, and unable to stop the slow, relentless advance of a species that had been preparing for this for millennia. And the humans? They were just getting started. The coalition was breaking apart. Every defeat made their leaders angrier at each other instead of at the humans. Trust between their member races was almost gone, but one thing still held them together: fear of what would happen if they lost completely. That fear pushed them into one last, desperate gamble. They decided to gather every ship, every soldier, and every weapon left in their possession for one final battle. This wouldn't be like the attack on Earth or the raids on the colonies. This time, they would throw everything at the humans in a single, overwhelming wave. If they won, humanity would be crushed once and for all. If they lost, the coalition itself might not survive. In a massive hidden dockyard orbiting a gas giant, their last great fleet came together. Dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, carriers stuffed with fighter squadrons, cruisers, and destroyers. Very surviving warship that could still fly was there. Alongside them came experimental weapons rushed into service: energy cannons, gravity warheads, and boarding drones. This was the coalition's last card, but they didn't know that humans were already watching. Hidden stealth probes had been shadowing their movements for weeks, sending constant updates to United Fleet Command. Admiral Rains studied the reports, tracing the enemy's formation on her tactical map. She saw their desperation in the way. They moved fast, reckless, willing to take risks they never would have taken at the start of the war. They want one last battle, she said quietly. Fine. Let's give them one they'll never forget. The human plan was simple in words, but difficult in execution. Lure the coalition fleet into a place where their numbers meant nothing and crush them completely. The location chosen was a narrow region of space called the Red Scar, a tangle of asteroid fields and unstable gravity pockets. Large fleets couldn't maneuver well there, but humans had spent centuries training in those conditions. The bait was set. A small human task force appeared near the Red Scar, attacking a minor coalition. Listening post and then retreating just enough to make it look like they were fleeing in panic. The coalition fleet took the bait instantly. Their commanders ordered a full pursuit, eager to destroy the human ships and claim a victory they could broadcast to the galaxy. As the alien warships pushed into the Red Scar, the trap began to close. From behind drifting asteroids and shadowed rock formations, the main human fleet appeared, black holes glinting with faint starlight. At the same time, hidden minefields activated, sealing off the coalition's escape routes. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in thousands of years. Massive explosions lit the asteroid field, shockwaves rolling through the narrow channels. Human warships darted between rocks with the precision of predators in their hunting ground, striking hard and vanishing before the larger alien vessels could aim. Coalition dreadnoughts tried to bring their big guns to bear, but in the tight spaces, they became slow-moving targets. From the bridge of the Vigilant, Admiral Rain directed the battle like a chess match. Unit Bravo, cut off their flank. Delta Wing, disable those carriers before they launch another fighter wave. Keep them pinned. Every order was executed with flawless coordination. Human railguns punched through enemy armor. Torpedoes spiraled around asteroids to hit engines from behind. Even the Coalition's experimental weapons couldn't save them. Most were destroyed before they could fire more than once. Inside the chaos, human boarding teams struck again, seizing several enemy ships and turning them against their former allies. Seeing their own vessels firing on them shattered what little morale the Coalition crews had left. The turning point came when the Coalition flagship, a massive vessel that had been leading the attack, was surrounded. Human destroyers swarmed, it stripping away its escort ships one by one. Then the Vigilant moved in, its main guns tearing through the flagship's shields. Rain gave the order, and a final broadside ripped the ship apart in a blinding explosion that lit the entire battlefield. With their leader gone and escape routes blocked, the Coalition fleet collapsed. Some ships tried to surrender, others attempted desperate breakouts, but most were destroyed where they stood. The battle was over in hours. The greatest force the Coalition had ever assembled was now nothing but wreckage drifting in the Red Scar. The victory was complete, but Rain knew the war wasn't over until the galaxy understood what had happened. She ordered a transmission, sent to every known communication network. The message was simple: the Coalition's last fleet has been destroyed. Humanity will accept your surrender. We will not forget those who fought with honor. But to those who started this war, know this: we were patient for 3,000 years, and if you try again, we will be waiting. The word spread faster than any fleet could travel. On worlds still under Coalition control, alien soldiers heard the news and laid down their weapons. Resistance fighters moved in to take back their homes. Former Coalition allies rushed to distance themselves, declaring neutrality or outright joining humanity's side for the civilians in occupied human colonies. The news was like the first warm sunlight after a long winter. The smirks they had worn since the first day of the war turned into wide, unstoppable smiles. The day they had been waiting for had come. The Dawn Coalition had thrown everything they had into one last gamble, and they had lost. Humanity now stood stronger than ever, not just as a survivor, but as a power the galaxy could no longer ignore, underestimate. And somewhere, deep in the quiet of space, Admiral Rain stood at the bridge of the Vigilant. Looking out at the drifting wreckage, she didn't smile. Not yet. There was still work to do, still colonies to free, still wounds to heal. But in her eyes burned the calm, unshakable certainty that had carried humanity through every battle. The war was ending, and humanity had won it their way. The Red Scar had ended it. The Coalition's greatest fleet was gone, their proud flagship nothing but twisted wreckage drifting between asteroids. Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. It was no longer a rumor, was fact. Humanity had won, but winning a war was not the same as ending it. The Coalition still had outposts, still had occupied worlds, still had soldiers scattered across space who hadn't yet heard or refused to believe the truth. Admiral Rain knew this would be the most delicate stage of all. Victory could be thrown away if handled poorly. Her first move was to open the channels to every Coalition world, every remaining leader. No threats, no shouting, just the same calm voice that had directed every battle. The war is over. The last fleet you sent against us has been destroyed. Surrender now, and your people will be treated with respect. Resist, and you will leave us no choice. Some resisted out of pride. A few tried to fight on, but without fleets, without supply lines, without hope, they fell quickly. Others gave in immediately, their leaders too afraid to risk annihilation. And in many places, it wasn't even the governments who decided, it was the soldiers themselves, who laid down their arms the moment they saw human warships arriving in orbit. The liberation of human colonies was the most emotional part of it all. On New Carthage, the same factory worker, Elias Kane, who had smirked at his alien captors months ago, stood in the crowd as human marines marched through the streets. There was no cheering, no wild celebration, just a deep, quiet pride. The kind humans carried in their bones. People hugged each other, tears in their eyes. Not because they were surprised, but because they had always known this day would come. On Harrow's edge, old Garrett Hale, the farmer who had mocked the alien officer who tried to execute him, stood on his porch and watched the alien transports leave. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The way he stood, arms crossed, eyes steady, said everything. Even in alien worlds that had fought for the coalition, something unexpected happened. Ordinary civilians began to approach human soldiers, not with fear, but with curiosity. They had heard the stories of how humans fought with precision, avoided harming innocents, and treated prisoners with dignity. In the chaos of war, humanity had shown a kind of discipline the galaxy hadn't seen in thousands of years. And respect began to replace hatred. The coalition itself began to crumble from within. Member races who had once followed the warlords, out of loyalty or fear, now turned against them. Some overthrew their own leaders, choosing peace with humanity over more bloodshed. A few even asked to join the new alliance humanity was building, not as conquerors or servants, but as equals. Back on Earth, the United Fleet Command gathered for what was no longer a war council, but a peace summit. Admiral Rain stood before the room, her uniform plain, her voice steady. We didn't start this war, but we ended it. And now, we decide what comes next. There were arguments. Some wanted to punish the coalition's worlds harshly to make sure they never rose again. Others believed mercy would earn loyalty in the long run. In the end, humanity chose a path somewhere in between justice for the war criminals who had started it, but open hands to those who were willing to rebuild in peace. The rebuilding began quickly. Human engineers and alien volunteers worked side by side to restore cities, repair spaceports, and re-establish trade routes. Supply convoys now carried food, medicine, and tools instead of weapons. The same stealth ships that had once struck from the shadows now escorted refugee transports to safety, for the first time in living memory. The galaxy wasn't being held together by fear, but by mutual respect. And at the center of it all was humanity, the same species the coalition had once thought of as weak, unprepared, and unimportant. Months after the last battle, the surviving coalition leaders were brought to Earth for the signing of the new accord. They were escorted into a great hall, its walls lined with banners from every liberated world. At the center of the room stood Admiral Rain. She didn't look like a conqueror. There was no crown, no throne, just a woman in a simple uniform, who had carried her people through the hardest war in millennia. When the alien delegates hesitated to sit, she simply said, "You came to destroy us. You failed. But if you want peace, we will give it to you. If you want war again..." And here she allowed herself the faintest, coldest smile. You know how that ends. The accords were signed. The war was over. That night, Rain stood alone on the balcony of Fleet Command, looking out over the lights of the city. Behind her, the celebrations echoed music, laughter, the sounds of people finally able to breathe again. But her eyes were on the stars. She knew peace was fragile. Somewhere, someday, someone else would try again. And that was the reason humanity had smirked when this war began. Not because they were arrogant, not because they enjoyed fighting, but because they understood something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten: peace is only safe when you are ready for war. 3,000 years of preparation had paid off. Humanity had not just survived, they had proven once and for all that they were not a prey species. Not a forgotten backwater civilization, but a force the galaxy could never ignore again. And if another enemy ever dared to test them, humanity would. Be ready, always.